Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's show is being broadcast live and is called The Snowball Lie. Usually, a snowball lie will eventually grow to a point where it will collapse under the weight of its internal contradictions. The corruption in the money system we've been reporting on this series is a snowball lie. This reminds me of Sir Walter Scott's statement, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." Thanks as always to Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Mo Jackson, audio and teleprompter, and Cruchet Starnes, floor director. Last week, we had our I told you so moment, not once but twice. This is called pulling the thread on the snowball lie. The first time was with the assassination of Justice Anton Scalia, and we have a video clip that we're going to be seeing. Well, what happened this week is that WikiLeaks revealed a February 9th email from John Podesta that refers to Scalia's assassination using the KGB term wet works. This went viral on the internet, and so did my tweet about the illegality in the entire legal system and that Merrick Garland, Obama's nominee to replace Scalia, had been on the three-judge panel that botched my whistleblower retaliation case in 2012. Justice Roberts and the Judicial Conference refused to reinstate me, even though this meant they were ignoring the 188 ministers of finance on the World Bank's Board of Governors and prevented the World Bank from qualifying for a capital increase. In my tweets this week, I kept on pointing out Justice Scalia's statement in favor of an Article 5 convention. This is the statement that somebody tried to erase from my teleprompter. And this is Justice Scalia's words. The founders inserted this alternative method of obtaining constitutional amendments because they knew the Congress would be unwilling to give attention to many issues the people are concerned with, particularly those involving restrictions on the federal government's own power. The founders foresaw that, and they provided the convention as a remedy. If the only way to get that convention is to take this minimal risk, then it's a reasonable one. 3 days after I denounced Justice Scalia, the D.C. Bar, the American Bar Association, the International Law Association, and the rest of the legal profession for hiding the fact that Congress has been extending a state of emergency behind closed doors to justify secret martial law, Justice Scalia met with a mysterious sudden death. The United States monetary gold reserves that Kennedy and Reagan accessed before they were gunned down are in the global debt facility administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. On February 8th, as overseer mandate trustee of the Global Debt Facility, and on behalf of the Board of Governors, and approved by the Board of Governors, I replaced the United States representatives on the Board of Governors and the Board of Executive Directors because they broke the articles of the Bretton Woods institutions trying to steal the monetary gold reserves from the world's people. Now the Secretariat of the World Bank and IMF is trying to overrule the Board of Governors. Bertrand Badre, who was then Managing Director and Chief Financial Officer of the World Bank, signed a document on February 15th in 2016 stating that he was dissolving the global debt facility.
And from what you just said before, just to do a little review, we have been in martial law since 1861, since the Civil War, so that if there wasn't martial law, if it was ever lifted, okay, we could get at this gold and no one would get shot at. Would that be the end result of something like this?
We can now get at that gold because the people who decide what to do with the gold are the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. And Jack Lew has now been removed from the Board of Governors because he has been breaking the articles of the World Bank and IMF. And I'm actually now voting for the United States during this interregnum until the Constitution of 1789 goes back into effect.
How do we get that Constitution to go back into effect? What are the steps that have to be taken?
This is what happened to Justice Scalia, because he was trying to do exactly that when he was murdered in Texas.
All right, hold it here. On me here. We're about to talk about something from the inside. You know, Judge Scalia, he went on a little hunting trip, and then he ended up dead, okay? And let me tell you something, people. They don't commit suicide like you're being told. They don't die of natural causes like you're being told, okay? And Karen's going to explain to you what happened to Justice Scalia. Do a little backup of what you were presenting to him, and then we'll go forward with his death.
Well, the fact that the Constitution of 1789 is not in force and effect and that we have martial law, the legal profession, it's their job to tell you whether when you go into a federal court, whether you're going into a court under the Constitution or whether you're going into an administrative proceeding, which is where the courts are. The judges, the federal judges, are not doing what they have given their oaths to do. And their oaths are supposedly bonded. The fidelity insurers are taking the premiums for the fidelity insurance, and they're not issuing the premium. They're not issuing the policies for that. So we have a situation which is totally out of control, and the legal profession has been complicit with this. And so I called Justice Scalia on the carpet. There was a cartoon that showed him and Justice Clarence Thomas, and it said, don't people understand what the Supreme Court is? And I put this cartoon on my public access TV show, and I believe that Justice Scalia was going to explain what the actual situation is. He was going to do his job on the Supreme Court. He was not going to be complicit in a matrix. That's what I believe. But in any event, we will never know because there was supposed to be an autopsy. If you're in Texas and you die outside of a hospital, you're required to have an autopsy. They flew his body out before the autopsy could be performed, but I understand that Badre forgot that the Board of Governors of the World Bank is the ultimate authority and did not authorize his statements. Bertrand Badre was caught in the headlights and hoisted by his own petard. I declared Badre's illegal proclamation on behalf of an unnamed president of the World Bank to be null and void, and he was fired after that. I tweeted Barack Obama, the governors and adjutants general, many of whom are lawyers, about the nomination of Merrick Garland to fill Scalia's seat. The silence and stonewalling after my fundamental accusations, when Congress keeps on declaring a state of emergency, especially when Justice Scalia was on record in favor of an Article 5 convention and his reasons for this, the United States is in interregnum. This is open and shut. The second I told you so moment has to do with 9/11. We have had lots of views on last week's segment on 9/11, that false flag event. On October 11th, I noticed that an article about 9/11 and my comments on it were taken down from the internet. I tweeted about this, and the article and my comment went right back up as if they had never been removed in the first place. The Sirius report, which had written the article, was between a rock and a hard place because I had saved my comment, and this was bad enough to do real harm. Let's drill down on what was in the article and my comment on it. As you know, I put segments up on the internet and respond to questions and comments, and have been doing this for a year and a half. This is done to remain relevant and, most importantly, to earn and try and keep people's trust. In this day, that is a very precious commodity. We have been called the best show in media a couple of times. Although you wouldn't know it from the false counters, we have a very large audience. A couple of months ago, Lee Wanta said we had more than 30 million followers on Facebook. That was probably one of the reasons that the Sirius report put their article right back up. After we complained that Moscow State University's English website about how the Jesuits have falsified history, their website is called Chronologia, that was taken down from the internet, and the website went right back up after we complained about it. So let me acknowledge now one of the complaints, which is that we're hard to follow. People want us to spell things out so that they can understand them. What happened when my comment on the Sirius Report's article about 9/11 was restored to the internet, this is a very good way to learn about what's going on. Here is what I said. My comments are frequently not published, and so I post them anyway, which is what I did with a comment last month from an article in the Sirius Report about how 9/11 signaled the end of an empire and an era, although nobody knew the name of the empire. My comment named the empire as the network of global corporate control. And I put a picture up in Twitter, which was in the article, and shows how the Twin Towers were crashing in Manhattan. Another comment was that the National War College power transition model was telling us that the United States is going to kick out the Fed, and this comment was retweeted 15 times. Now the Sirius Report took down their article and Twitter removed my comment. I must have hit a raw nerve. And let's talk about what was in the Sirius Report's article. It presents a number of truths, although it's suffering from the gloom and doom fault in that it doesn't say anything about the power transition model from the U.S. War College, which is predicting that there's a coalition to take down the network of global corporate control, or about the international monetary gold reserves that are on deposit in the global debt facility. And let me quote from their article. Through the creation of corporations, a global financial system, globalization of commerce, creation of organizations to enforce their aims, control of the mainstream media, and the infiltration of political institutions, they managed to control the shape and destiny of much of the world for decades and beyond. So one might ask, where exactly did it go all wrong, and why are they now in free fall and soon to be consigned to the history books? Whilst we can focus on particular events in history as a pointer to when their bubble burst, that rather detracts from the broader, more complex reasons why. Arguably, the abandonment of the gold standard set off a chain reaction resulting in what we see today, which is a wrecked financial system and economics, the details of which warrant another article all by themselves. Desperation continues as China quietly goes about their business. The alternative media continues to push the idea that the empire is engineering the mother of all financial crashes to ensure they can implement a one-world government, currency, and army, which would be the pinnacle of their aims and objectives. However, a brief analysis of what has unfolded in the last decade or so proves that to be totally inaccurate and principally why they're now on the verge of collapse. There is no doubt that there's been an awakening in humanity to this empire, although in real terms, that's still a relatively small number in percentage terms. What we can say, though, is that the birth of the Internet has had unexpected and deeply damaging consequences for the empire. There's also no doubt that the rise of China and Russia to challenge this empire was a significant contributory factor. However, what ultimately was going to be their undoing would be a financial war which they have been engaged in for the last decade or so. Crucially, the financial crisis of 2008 was not engineered by this empire, but as a result of reckless, unregulated speculation they permitted on Wall Street and elsewhere, which started back in the 1990s. When the U.S. continued to renege on financial promises it's made to Russia, they dumped mortgage bonds, which caused the subprime crisis, which was the catalyst for the crisis of that year. If the empire truly wanted to implode the financial system and impose their one-world ideology, that would have been the perfect opportunity to do so then. However, what we saw was blind panic, as they were literally hours from implosion, so they implemented a bailout program designed to save the so-called too-big-to-fail banks. St. Petersburg International Economic Forum for the last 8 years since the Lehman collapse, who were made sacrificial lambs for the greater good, we have seen utterly failed central bank policy, principally relating to quantitative easing and zero interest rate policy and negative interest rate policy. The whole purpose of these policies was to prop up the too-big-to-fails and the likes of Wall Street. There was zero intention to see any of that fiscal stimulus enter the real economy to create growth, jobs, and prosperity. It was merely an exercise in self-preservation, even though it was doomed to fail, and why their empire is now on the verge of collapse. We now see the divergence between market illusion and economic reality becoming near exponential. Ironically, even within the financial sector, there are many who will privately say the game is up, but it's all about confidence and preserving the illusion to perpetuate the massive con trick being served upon the people of the West, in particular. What further undermines this illusion that the empire remains in charge and is engineering the next and final economic crash is that in the last 8 years, we've seen the rise of China and Russia to the point that they're now the dominant players in the world, but not from a U.S. hegemony perspective. They have built an alternative financial platform, signed countless bilateral trade agreements, and military cooperation initiatives leading to the birth of a new Silk Road. They have broadened their remit to now dealing with international affairs such as in Syria and accelerated the demise of the dollar as the global reserve currency through extensive de-dollarization programs. Furthermore, they have undertaken internal economic, political, and social reforms to strengthen their own nations. Why exactly would this empire have waited this long to become so weak that it's now unable to usurp China and Russia to fulfill its one-world agenda? Why humanity must let go of its tainted history to redefine our future? There are those who will say that China and Russia are all part of the game as the empire will shift its focus from west to east. To do so would be an insult to the history, culture, and dynamism of these nations, especially in the face of extreme adversity. They will and never would succumb to the empire. The empire ultimately failed because arrogantly they believed they were untouchable, ignorantly because they believed in self-preservation at all costs, and they underestimated the likes of China and Russia. Their self-indulgence allowed their financial system to implode, and their contempt for the people who sustained their empire became self-evident to the masses, in spite of them not knowing what exactly this empire is. The immediate future remains unclear, particularly for Western nations, but we're now witnessing the final days of an empire which will be written about with historic clarity, but will leave the question in many minds: how exactly did they get away with what they did for so long, and why did we not see it? So my comment was, your article has not named the empire as Vitali Glatfelder and Battiston of ETH Zurich, the network of global corporate control. You are incorrect also that the immediate future remains unclear, particularly for Western nations. We have been guided by an accurate power transition model that comes from the U.S. National War College. You are correct that we are now witnessing the final days of an empire which will be written about with historical clarity. Your last point, how exactly did they get away with what they did for so long, and why did we not see it? We did see it, and by raising red herrings in the alternative media, the answer to your question can be understood readily through this comment. So, what I've been doing is to go to the Russian and Chinese embassies in Washington, and then to contact the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They had a meeting in Goa, India last week. The whole point about the power transition model and game theory is that the people who can influence a problem change positions in reaction to each other. The factor which is now bringing down the network of global corporate control is the awareness of the public in each of the BRICS countries, as well as in the allies of the United States that are subject to state capture by the network of global corporate control, that is, Japan, Germany, and the U.S. Does Japan want to be defended by U.S. military? The Joint Japan-U.S. Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement is keeping the United States military honest, and there's no getting around that fact. That is why the Postmaster General of the United States, Megan Brennan, is still refusing to this day to deliver the priority letter which I mailed to the Japanese embassy in Washington. And Twitter removed a tweet that I had put up showing what I had sent to Japan. This is the second time that the U.S. Postmaster General has been caught up in fraud. The first time was the notarial protest when the Global Debt Facility placed the Federal Reserve under commercial liens. The fact is that the network of global corporate control is now in liquidation. The world's monetary gold reserves are available, as well as local currencies, to fight this corruption in the international monetary system. The process is a one-way street. As we showed previously, the dominoes keep on falling relentlessly, and I have a nice clip about dominoes if we can run it.
Everybody knows about playing with dominoes, but what you may not know is that a domino can knock over another domino which is about 1.5 times larger. So what I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. And the smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high and 1 millimeter thick. And I will carefully place it. And there are 13 dominoes, and the largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds and is more than 1 meter tall. Ready? Boom. That was 13 dominoes. If I had 29 dominoes, the last domino would be as tall as the Empire State Building. Here we go. What's the physics going on here? Well, every time you stand up a domino, you lift it against gravity. And that stores some of gravitational potential energy in the domino. And you only have to put in a little bit of push to get it to that tipping point. And then you get all that energy back again when it falls over. And that's more than enough energy to knock over the next domino, which releases even more energy. So it turns out the amplification in this series of 13 dominoes is about 2 billion. So we put in a little tiny bit of energy at the beginning, and we get 2 billion times as much out at the end. But of course, we put all that energy in by lifting these dominoes and standing them up again. So that's a kind of chain reaction. You trigger it, and more energy comes out, and more energy is released each step. Let's see it in slow-mo.
Critics accuse me of working for the cabal. There are many voices in the alternative media that are actually really there to put spin on things and confuse people. One way to spot disinformation in the alternative media is to see whether someone has earned an audience over time. Although I started reporting corruption 10 years inside the World Bank and 7 years after I was fired in retaliation, I only started showing up in the alternative media in 2013. The fact that there has been only one article in the mainstream media, which was in Spanish in Newsweek on Espanol, is one sign that I'm the real deal. And in 2014, Richard Karpinski wrote in Google, quote, "Karen Hudes, the World Bank whistleblower, is still not showing up in the mainstream press. She makes reference to a study of global corporate control which appeared in PLOS ONE in 2011. 147 of the 43,000 multinational corporations control 40% of the net worth of companies in world trade and 60% of their annual earnings. This is reported by 3 mathematicians at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Karen Hudes, World Bank insider, reveals who's behind the throne. The degree of control of the mainstream press in suppressing stories of this magnitude certainly supports the PLOS ONE paper in its conclusion that they constitute a single conglomerate by interlocking boards of directors. She's on Facebook as well as on Google News and in many YouTube videos. This is likely to be a crazy year which could bring the world economy out of the bankster-caused long-term depression, or could fail and make things much worse. Let's side with her and improve the whole world." And that's the end of the quote. For people who are skeptical about whether there's really a large store of the world's gold, other precious metals, Treaty of Versailles bonds, artworks, and other treasure in the global debt facility, just look at the attempts to steal these assets, including Wolfgang Struck's latest attempt. For those people who are sure there's no way out of the doom and gloom scenarios, pay attention to how the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, respond. And I had a question that I was going to deal with, but we're running out of time, so you'll just have to look at the question in the teleprompter, and I'll be dealing with this on my social media, the answer. It's not trivial. We really do have to deal with the UN troops that are on U.S. soil. Thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's segment is about the snowball lie, that is the corrupt international paper money system. Till next week, I'm Karen Hudes.